Hello again and welcome back to the channel. This is Michael from TOEFLresources.com. In today's video, I'm going to take another deep dive into the SpeechRater AI. That's the technology which is used in part to score the speaking section of the TOEFL IBT test. Once again, I'm doing this with a website called My Speaking Score, which licenses that technology. If you want to experiment with the AI on your own, if you want to repeat some of the experiments I've done, I'll give you a link down below in the video description where you can sign up. Now, I will warn you, this video is probably going to be pretty long and I don't edit, so get ready for that. But if you just want the short form, the conclusion I reach at the end is that if you want to improve the vocabulary part of your score, you need to sort of sprinkle in some adverbs and adjectives into your responses. Plus, you need to avoid repeating words too many times. That's it. So you can probably turn off the video and go, implement that into your TOEFL preparations, but I do hope you'll stick around. Also, I want to say that I've been putting up these videos about technology and AI because I want to highlight that now, more than ever, students are empowered to prepare for standardized tests on their own. It's a different era. I think we're entering an era where standardized test scores will no longer highly correlate to how much money you have to spend on test prep. I think that's good because it creates a more equitable educational environment for the whole world. Super, right? Now, I understand that those sorts of statements do attract some amount of controversy and attention. And I get that. I'm sympathetic. And so I do want to point out that there is still a lot of value to that traditional teacher-student relationship, even when it comes to standardized testing preparation. So I do encourage you, if you think it will help, reach out to a qualified tutor. Reach out to a human being for help. Certainly if you get a teacher that can help you interpret the technology, interpret the data, and to give you actionable suggestions, you'll do better on your tests. So I'm not saying to totally disregard that traditional teacher-student relationship. I'm just saying that, things are changing. There are a lot of tools, and that you as a student and you as a test taker are more empowered than ever before. This is good for you. Unequivocally, it's good for students to have new technology and new tools available. So just keep that in mind. Reach out to a teacher if you need some help. I can recommend some to you if you wish. All right, so let's set that aside for now and we'll get to the whole point of the video. We're talking about vocabulary, and we're particularly talking about vocabulary diversity. I'm going to play in just a moment a sample response from John Healy, who actually created My Speaking Score. And you're going to listen and you're going to be like, this answer is fantastic. It's perfect. It only got 29. And I mean, 29 is fantastic. Most people are totally happy. But you're going to listen and you're going to say, oh, shucks. Why didn't this get 30? This is clearly like the best TOEFL answer in history. Let's listen. See what you think.
According to an article in a campus publication, the university has made a decision to tear down the old historic auditorium, and the university claims that this new building will have a vastly improved appearance, and in addition, it will be a much larger facility. And the man in the conversation, unfortunately, thinks that this is an absolutely terrible idea for a couple of reasons. First, the man feels like the auditorium is as beautiful as a building can get. For example, he states that it was one of the university's first buildings built ever, and the university should be interested in preserving that building rather than tearing it down. And furthermore, the man believes the auditorium is currently the perfect size. For instance, he argues that the facility is never currently at capacity and is therefore not in need of any kind of radical expansion because the university auditorium is serving the students well.
Okay, so that's really, really good, right? But it only got 29. Let's look at the SpeechRater report. So like all the things that I really focus on are quite high. Speaking rate is high. That's the one I care about the most. Phrase length is high. That's something I care about the most. But, oh, and the pronunciation is fantastic, right? It's near native or native level. But the vocabulary diversity is 54 out of 100. And you're listening to that and you're thinking, oh my gosh, his vocabulary is fantastic. And yet he only got 54 out of 100. And that's the point of this video. Like, you know, since I started putting these ones out about speech rate and phrase length, the students have been doing much, much better. The ones that I talk to. And so they're sharing their reports and they're like, look, I did what you said. I spoke faster, my speaking rate score went up. I eliminated the pauses, my phrase length score went up. But why is my vocabulary diversity score still low? And this also mirrors like what native speakers experience when they take the TOEFL sometimes. They'll get 28 or 29 in speaking and they have no idea why. And it may have something to do with vocabulary diversity. So, you know, you can look at the transcript of John's response and it's very good. And he's got adjectives and adverbs throughout the answer, right? Historic, beautiful, terrible, radical, perfect. And then, you know, he's got some adverbs as well. Currently, he uses a couple times, and there's more. I can't, vastly. So he's got these adverbs and he's got adjectives. But you'll notice a feature that may be problematic. He repeated the word university 5 times. He repeated the word auditorium 5 times. He repeated the word building 4 times. And he's also got, he said it's one of the first buildings built, which, you know, is kind of like a little bonus because those are very similar words. So there is some vocabulary repetition, and I believe that is problematic. Like, it's not a big deal. His score is still 29, but what we're focusing on today is vocabulary diversity. We want to get that score up. So let's listen to another answer. This is me, and I've tried to simulate something that a student sent me. Let's listen to me talking about mental accounting. In this lecture, the professor explains mental accounting, which happens when people divide money into two accounts. However, they save the money in one account and they spend the money from the other one. The professor gives an example of his experience to illustrate it. He explains when he was younger, he worked in an office with a regular salary. Also, he worked as a waiter each weekend. However, he used to save the money he made from his regular job and spent all the money from his job as a waiter on unnecessary things. As a result, when he decided to buy a new house, it took a long time to buy it. However, if he had saved some money from both accounts, he could have bought it sooner. And that's how the professor illustrates mental accounting. Okay, so that's pretty good too, right? But it only got 25 points. And that's the heartbreaking score for pharmacists who need a 26-point speaking result. Now, well, let's go down. We'll look at the vocabulary diversity score. 49. 49. You know, 49. Ugh, that's rough. I mean, the other things are pretty good, right? Like, you know, the speaking rate's 90. That's nice. The phrase length is 87. That's pretty good. My pronunciation score is great. Even better than John's. But the vocabulary diversity score is worse. It's worse. And you can see that I don't have a lot of good adverbs and adjectives. I want to put more of those in. And I've also got repetition. I repeated the word accounting 5 times. I repeated the word money 6 times. I repeated the word professor 3 times. So I'm lacking adjectives and adverbs, and I've done a lot of repetition. Vocabulary diversity 49. Everything else is very good. The vocabulary diversity is just 49. So we're going to try to fix this. Here's the first experiment. First experiment is to insert some adjectives and adverbs, to kind of sprinkle those in, to season the answer. Now, as you can see, this response got 26, so that's fantastic. You know, that's nice. That's a little improvement. It's fractional, marginal improvement. But it doesn't accomplish what I wanted in terms of vocabulary diversity. First up, let's listen. In this lecture, the professor quickly explains mental accounting, which happens when people divide money into two separate accounts. However, they save the money in one account and they spend the money from the other one. The professor gives a brief example of his experience to illustrate it. He explains when he was younger, he worked in an office with a regular salary. Also, he worked as a waiter each weekend. However, he used to save the money he made from his regular job and spent all the money from his job as a waiter on completely unnecessary things. As a result, when he decided to buy an expensive new house, it took him a long time to buy it. However, if he had wisely saved some money from both accounts, he could have bought it sooner. And that's how the professor quickly illustrates mental accounting. So you can see that I've inserted some adverbs and adjectives along the way. I said things like he quickly explains, he gives a brief example. I think I used the phrase separate accounts. And then I said completely unnecessary things, wisely saved. And then I think I used quickly illustrates at the end. So I've inserted a bunch of these adjectives and adverbs. Now the score went up. You know, as we've already established, longer answers with more words almost automatically get higher scores. How nice. But did my vocabulary diversity increase? What is it? No, it did not. It's 47. It didn't change at all. It's basically the same thing. It's actually like 2 points less, which is, I guess, margin of error. So it didn't help. It did not help. I mean, the conventional wisdom here is that if you just put in some adverbs and adjectives, you can get a higher score. I'm not quite sure that's correct. And I repeated this experiment a bunch of times. Like, it never helped. It never helped. And I don't care that the score is higher. Like, we're focusing only on vocabulary diversity. That's all I care about today. So we need to fix it. Okay, so let's abandon this particular experiment. Let's try another one. In this one, I'm just going to use much less repetitive vocabulary. I'm going to take out those adjectives and adverbs. I'm going to discard them. I'm going to remove them. And I'm just going to try to change words. I'm going to try to avoid repeating stuff. So I think in this case, I'm going to say money just 2 times. I'm going to say accounting just 2 times. And I'm going to change a few other things. So it's less repetitive. Same answer, less repetitive. Let's see what happens. In this lecture, the professor explains mental accounting, which happens when people divide money into 2 accounts. However, they save the contents of one of them and they spend the money from the other one. The professor gives an example of his experience to illustrate it. He explains when he was younger, he worked in an office with a regular salary. Also, he worked as a waiter each weekend. However, he used to save the salary he made from his regular job and spent all the earnings from his job as a waiter on unnecessary things. As a result, when he decided to buy a new house, it took a long time to buy it. However, if he had saved some cash from both occupations, he could have bought it sooner. And that's how the professor illustrates this concept. Okay, so I'm repeating things much less, right? I even changed jobs to occupations at one point. My overall score is 24, so clearly this didn't help too much. I don't care about the overall score right now. Like other things were down. Well, I think for some reason I was speaking a little bit slower, so that affected the score. But let's look at the vocabulary diversity. 58. So that still kind of stinks, right? It's better. It's a little better, but it's not great. So, we can determine that avoiding repetition will help, but it's not helping much. It's not helping all alone. So I'm still troubled. Let's do one more experiment. How about we combine it? What if we add all those adjectives and adverbs, and we also reduce our repetitiveness? So we're going to do both of those things. Let's see what happens. The score is 26, so that's a good sign, but let's listen.
In this lecture, the professor quickly explains mental accounting, which happens when people divide money into two separate accounts. However, they save the contents of one account and they spend the money from the other one. The professor gives a brief example of his experience to illustrate it. He explains when he was younger, he worked in an office with a regular salary. Also, he worked as a waiter each weekend. However, he used to save the salary he made from his regular job and spent all the earnings from his job as a waiter on completely unnecessary things. As a result, when he decided to buy an expensive new house, it took a long time to buy it. However, if he had wisely saved some cash from both accounts, he could have bought it sooner. And that's how the professor concisely illustrates mental accounting.
Okay, so in this case, I've done both of the strategies. I've put in the adverbs and the adjectives, plus I've greatly reduced my repetitiveness. I'm only saying money 2 times. I'm only saying accounting 2 times. And I think I said job just like 2 times instead of 3. So what was the result on my vocabulary diversity score? 75. That's great, right? So I think we've determined that the key to vocabulary diversity is parts of speech. So you need to have a mix of adverbs, adjectives, nouns, vocabulary, verbs and stuff. Plus, you need to avoid excessive repetition of words. And if you can do both of those things, your vocabulary diversity score goes up. And again, I've repeated this experiment a few times, and that seems to be the case. Doing one of those things is not enough. Doing one of those things will have a negligible impact on your score. But if you can do both of those things, your vocabulary diversity score will increase, and hopefully your overall score will increase as well. I mean, the overall benefit is marginal, but that's kind of what the TOEFL is. We're just trying to find some way to get from 25 to 26 points. Before we end, let's do one more experiment. There was a word that I repeated a bunch of times, professor. I said professor 3 times, even in the answer I played just a moment ago. I want to reduce that down to 1 time. And now I'm doing this experiment particularly because professor is one of those things that people repeat a lot, right? And it's just natural as part of your template. The professor explains mental accounting. The professor gives an example of his life. And then at the end you say, that's how the professor illustrates mental accounting. This is a very common repetition. Everyone's doing it. So let's play it again without the word professor 3 times.
In this lecture, the speaker quickly explains mental accounting, which happens when people divide money into 2 separate accounts. However, they save the contents of one account and they spend the money from the other one. The professor gives a brief example of his experience to illustrate it. He explains that when he was younger, he worked in an office with a regular salary. Also, he worked as a waiter each weekend. However, he used to save the salary he made from his regular job and spent all the earnings from his job as a waiter on completely unnecessary things. As a result, when he decided to buy an expensive house, it took a long time to buy it. However, if he had wisely saved some cash from both accounts, he could have bought it sooner. And that's how the instructor concisely illustrates mental accounting.
Okay, so this time you see I've changed professor. Now I say speaker, instructor, and then professor one time. How did that affect my vocabulary diversity? 91. 91. So I took out even more repetition, and my vocabulary diversity score increased even more. So I think we can understand now that repeating words too many times will lower your vocabulary diversity score and have a negative impact on your overall result. It's not just the repetition of words, it's also whether or not you've got all the parts of speech. So remember, adjectives and adverbs. I mean, most people have nouns and verbs in there automatically, but what is missing often is adjectives and adverbs. So there you go. That is a deep dive into the concept of vocabulary diversity. Again, this is just a small part of how your TOEFL speaking responses are scored, but I'm hoping that this information can kind of help you get that like one extra point you need. Right? It's just like football. It's a game of inches. You just a little bit here, a little bit there, and you're going to reach 26 points. All right, so if you have any questions about this, do leave them down below. I'll try to answer as soon as I can. And if you want to play around with the speech rater as well, put a link down in the video description. If you sign up, you can get a couple credits to play around for free. And if you do want to buy some credits, I'll give you a coupon so you can save some money. Saving money is always good. All right, that's all for now, but come back again in a few weeks or a few days. I should have another video about this by then. Take care. I'll see you later.